Hi, everybody. Thanks for checking out Bonaparte Mechanized Revolution's demo live stream. I'm Jongwoo Kim from Studio E Movie. I'm the creative director for this project.
And I'm Martin Brouard. I'm another of the co-founders of Studio Mugi, and I'm the executive producer and kind of the publisher, I guess.
So Martin, this is quite different from what we've been doing in the past, right? So I used to be at Kitfox. I was involved in Moon Hunters and led Shrouded Owl and Lucifer Within Us. So I've done management games, I've done action games, but not a strategy tactics hybrid like this one. It's certainly not a historical one.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, I was at Frima for many years. I was one of the co-founders of Sabotage, where we did The Messenger, barely touched Sea of Stars, but still, those are very different kind of games than what we're doing right now with Bonaparte, Mechanized Revolution, indeed.
Yeah, and so just in terms of what we're trying to do as a team and as a studio, we want to make games that have what we consider to be culturally relevant, right? And just thinking about the revolutions, right? They're not only are they exciting, but there's a lot to draw upon that. And so it also got me, a chance to actually use my history degree for once, right? And so, thinking about, trying to make projects that would still, have relevance for us today. The French Revolution especially has a lot of interesting characters, a lot of interesting factions and such. But there was that one particular figure, shall we say, that is notorious, has a controversial legacy. And of course, it's Napoleon Bonaparte, right?
The guy with the hat.
The guy with the hat, right? And I mean, the funny thing about that, though, is that, hey, in this game, there's two people with hats. What's up with that, right?
Yeah.
And simply put, this is an alternate history game. Right? This is not a straight retelling of the events in history. And you can even see that on the top left part of the screen here. We see these mechs, the colossi, in context of our game. And some people might wonder, okay, you guys are just taking huge leaps with history, and perhaps.
We're not even French.
Yeah, we're not even French. We're based in Quebec, Canada, so we are certainly taking some liberties. But we like to call our approach alternate history with authenticity for a few reasons. And so, you might notice that, hey, the protagonist is not literally Napoleon. You can be Celine or Cesar Bonaparte. You choose. So the gender identity and the role that your character plays in the French Revolution is kind of up to you as a player, right? But you'll notice that the other characters around them are very historical looking. That is because we want to depict Robespierre, the person who led the Reign of Terror, or Louis XVI, the king who was executed, as authentically as possible. Oof, right? And even the mechs themselves, we looked into a historical theory of phlogiston, which is this outdated theory that all combustible things have a material called phlogiston to serve as the basis for having these highly dramatized mechanical soldiers on the battlefield. And so I think that kind of sums up our approach, don't you think, Martin?
Yeah, it's very much a what-if approach. What if the phlogiston theory was actually true, and what if you as a player had been born with the talents and the strategic genius of Napoleon Bonaparte, but you can actually take the decision that you as a player would prefer, so you can basically reenact history or go completely in a different direction than what actually happened in the French Revolution. This, for me, is what's making Bonaparte super exciting as a strategy game player.
Absolutely. So we mentioned earlier, this is a strategy tactics hybrid game. And so as the historical Napoleon was both a political and military genius, we give the player, you, the opportunity to participate in both arenas in this game. And so on that note, let's get to the character selection screen here. So as mentioned, you can play as Cesar or Celine. And just a quick context around this is a very limited demo. So, we wanted to give you guys a taste of how the game is going to be. But it's accelerated on purpose, and it's shortened in terms of scope on purpose as well. And so let's look out for, go ahead, sorry.
Because, I don't know if you know of any strategy and tactical hybrid games. I don't. And we've asked a lot of people, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of these, if there are any. And to make a demo that showcases both different genres in a short amount of time. We really had to make it like a small bite-sized experience so that people can play this demo in like about 20 minutes and have a good idea of the global aspect of the game.
Absolutely. So it's a quick taster of everything. Hope you enjoy it. And so we'll start diving in here. As mentioned, oh, go ahead.
Who are we selecting, Cesar or Celine?
You tell me. I mean, who do you want to be?
I don't know. Let's play Celine for this time.
Okay, so let's change history more, and then let's play as Celine. And that brings us to the start of the campaign. It begins in July 1789. And those of you who know a little bit about the revolutionary history of France know that what's about to happen here, right? So King Louis XVI summons the Estates General, which is a gathering of members of the nobility, the clergy, and the commoners in order to discuss what to do with the financial crisis that's facing France. And so the player character, Celine Bonaparte, is in fact a member of the Royal Guard. And so they're here as a guard, but they're not a participant. But they do observe what is happening in the discussions. And again, if you're a bit familiar with the French history here, you'll know that this doesn't go very well. There's slight deviations already, though, because for one, the American War of Independence was fought on the French side using the colossal mechs called the Colossi. So departure in a way, but this exacerbates the bankruptcy of the French monarchy. And so then the question is what to do with this power that drains the well-being of the people, right? And so the king's solution, as you can imagine, is to raise more taxes. But some people are less happy. And so then now we see more famous figures. Danton, I think, is a favorite. I love these portraits now, man. Geneviève did an excellent job with these.
Yeah, Geneviève I've been working with Geneviève for years now back at Frima, and she was our first employee here at Studio Emugi, and a lot of the visuals and especially the magnificent portraits in the game are from her incredible talent. So yeah, Geneviève, thank God we have her.
Amazing work, Geneviève. And moving forward, here's also the famous Marquis de Lafayette, who fought in the American War of Independence and, was an influential figure in the early revolution. And depending on our choices in the game, perhaps, he'll have a different fate than in history. And here's the infamous Robespierre, who was at this point in time a young politician, an idealistic one who really fought for the people. Historically, I don't think he was actually present here, but for our dramatization, we include him here in the discussions at the Estates General. And Comte d'Artois is probably a lesser known figure for most people, but he's actually more royalist than his brother, the king himself. And later he becomes infamous Charles X of France post-revolution. And so we have our cast of major political figures all here. And it doesn't go well. Basically the deputies decide that, hey, the king's approach is not working. We're going to form a parliament known as the National Convention. And of course, the king doesn't want to recognize that. And here's the famous Honoré Mirabeau, who was the most influential political figure, looking very poised with his fingers.
Yeah, and what's interesting in our game is that Mirabeau also acts as kind of an advisor for the player. And for those of you that do not have as advanced knowledge of the French Revolution or French history as our friend Jongwoo here has, it's interesting because Mirabeau can actually be consulted to get some information on whatever the politics and the situation were at that time. So it's not something that if you don't know your French Revolution on the top of your fingers, you're not going to be able to play. It's actually very interesting to learn about it, but it's not something that's dry or that's going to take a lot of your time.
Absolutely, and we'll have a quick look at that later in our playthrough. And so things are getting heated very quickly here. And the king summons the royal army. to surround Versailles and Paris. And so that doesn't really resolve the situation. In fact, it makes the situation even worse. People rise up and they gather outside this little thing called the Bastille, which is the French fortress that existed prior to the revolution in the streets of Paris. It's demolished now, unfortunately. When we visited Paris, we saw pieces of the Bastille at Martin, but unfortunately, we only saw a scaled down models and which were actually made of the
Exactly. At Musée Carnavalet in Paris, there's amazing collection of artifacts and things about the French Revolution, and there are these stones from the Bastille in which they sculpted, replicas of the Bastille. It's really cool. We have a French historian, William Brou, from the channel Histoire en Jeu, who works with us and helps us to make sure that what we do is not completely different from reality, except for the giant robots, obviously.
So that's exactly right. So we try to do our research. We've taken certain liberties, but it was with the player empowerment in mind. And so that brings us to Celine, our protagonist, right? She is being asked to quell the riots on the streets of Paris. And she is ordered by the prince to deploy her Colossus in battle. And we can question these orders, but ultimately we are sent to quell the riots because, after all, you are a royal guard. But what you do in this situation changes, the direction of the revolution significantly. So now we arrive at the Battle of Bastille, and you can see that
this is the first aspect of the game. So it's the tactical, turn-based tactical combat aspect of the game, which will bring us later to the strategy, the kind of grand strategy aspect of the game.
Absolutely. So this is a look at how the battle systems work, essentially. But it's also a very dramatic moment, right? So on the streets, people have risen up, and they're demanding that the garrison that you see on the right stand down and let them in. But of course, the garrison are formed of loyal soldiers, and they're trying to defend it against citizens that they know that they should not harm if they can avoid it. But nonetheless, people are getting angry. And you might notice that there's a certain other Bonaparte here, Lucien, who historically wasn't present at the Battle of Bastille, but was a Jacobin and was a revolutionary that helps Napoleon come to power eventually.
It was his brother, right?
Yeah, exactly. Napoleon's brother. And Jacques Hébert is a very interesting figure we'll get more into in a second. He was more radical than some of the more famous Jacobins. And here we go. And now Celine announces her presence, and she tries to get the citizens to stand down.
This is the first major choice in the game and in the demo, obviously.
Absolutely, and Celine notices that her own brother is siding with the people here. And Lucien straight up asks Celine to side with the people. And this section of the game is an interpretation of what actually happened at the storming of Bastille. The Royal Guard was sent to quell the riots. But because they were Frenchmen themselves, unlike the other Royal Guard regiments, they chose to side with the rioters, whereas they were ordered to defend the garrison. And here is another character, Murat, who was Napoleon's historical cavalry general, who's serving as the player's lieutenant in this battle. And so with whom do your loyalties lie is the central question here. So for the purposes of demo, we're only allowing you to side with the people. But in the early access build, the latter option will be available.
So we might as well mention that we are planning to release Bonaparte in early access in January 2025. So it's coming pretty fast, but we wanted to make sure that for the demo, we gave you only this option for different reasons, but you will be able to go in a completely different direction in the full game.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't give everything away, right?
Yeah.
So we'll side with the people and liberate the Bastille. Let's go. And so the mech activates, and now we will attack the Bastille. Cool. So now combat begins. And so we drew a heavy inspiration from Fire Emblem for the core mechanics, but there's a lot of adaptations to make it work with the Gunpowder era and of course, our Colossus here. So Celine is piloting this unit. We will have her march forward and slash away at the defending infantry.
Take that.
Take that. And they'll fire back, but it'll scratch off some paint. We're okay. So we noticed that we made a frontal attack there, and so they were able to counterattack, right? We'll try something different with the Mura, who has a much more vulnerable Hussar unit, the light cavalry of the era. We'll go behind here. And you can see the units facing by the battalion's arrangement as well as the the arrows on the units, and we'll attack from the side here, well, the back side. And now we won't get hit again at all, right? And so by flanking, we're able to get significant advantages in battle.
Also, I would say that as you can probably see, the whole terrain, the tactical maps are all in 3D, the buildings and the map, but all of the units are in 2D. That we wanted to have a special visual flair that's different from a lot of the games. So those are all hand animated 2D units that are basically the troops that you will command. And another thing I would like to say is also that the Colossi are, kind of special hero units. These are rare units that you need to take care of. You can build some of them later on in the game in the strategic phase, but those are very expensive and rare units.
Yeah, that's right. So the idea for the setting is that the technology has been invented recently and has been employed in a military context, but in a limited context, right? And they're expensive to build, and led to the bankruptcy of the monarchy. So as Mathan said, they're supposed to be hero units, and much more of the standard units in the game are as you see here. And so Mathan mentioned hand animated units. You can see some of the citizens that have risen up, holding their pitchforks. We'll have to move forward here, and then you can see them run, in position. And believe it or not, these are actually in 2D, and they're just being affected by lighting and shadows to help it blend together with the 3D environment, as mentioned before. I'm just going to quickly reposition all these units, and I'll speed things up a little bit. One of the aspects that we didn't mention yet are the secondary stats, morale and heat. And so all these human units, the battalions, have morale, which improves or lowers their performance, or they might even surrender if it goes to 0. And you might wonder, okay, so then how do I make the most of that? Units like the militia are able to use the chant action, which helps to boost the morale of other units, even if they themselves aren't very powerful. And you can also use a rally action to boost the stats of units like some of the more formal trained units themselves. And here we saw the enemy artillery bombard our units. So Celine's mech is taking a bit of a beating there, but that's okay. It can take it.
Just to be careful about overeating, though.
Oh, good point. Good point. And so you can see the heat bar incrementing, and we'll get to that in a second. And so because the heat incremented to medium levels, we took a bit of damage here, and you can see that here. So mechs won't have morale, but they have a heat value, which increases with every action and every heat that they take. And if it gets too high, it might, really explode and take a lot of damage. But we'll just vent it in advance. And now, it's cool again. And we'll continue attacking. Flashing away like that. Okay. We will then target the artillery, which is giving us a lot of pain here. And make sure that they're stopped from bombarding Bonaparte's mech so much. And otherwise, you might notice that our units here are almost at the battle. So now we'll charge them in and have them stab away at the defending garrison. Like so. But because this one is a frontal attack, they will counterfire and do damage back. But that's okay. we're still in the battle. But here's a different unit, Machan. So the skirmishers have a slightly longer range than the defending musketeers. So we'll position them just a little bit in front, and then they're able to snipe away at the line infantry. Hopefully, it'll finish them off. I think they might have a little bit of health left. Okay. Just not enough. But that's okay. They can't counterattack anyway. And so taking advantage of unit ranges and their strengths and weaknesses, of course, is a key part of the tactical experience, of course. And we'll finish them up with Jacques Hebert's musketeer units. But I think we'll be okay. We have a lot more troops than they do. We kind of rushed their positions. And so now I think it's our opportunity to strike. I'll have Mora continue to attack the enemy artillery.
Oh, we didn't make the demo super hard. We want people to be able to experience a bit of everything. Obviously in the full game, the balancing and the difficulty will be a bit more challenging.
Right. And also, this is the first battle of the game, and is it's supposed to get you used to the combat in the game, right? And so, yeah, this battle isn't particularly balanced to be. It's pretty straightforward, right? But definitely there will be a tactical depth and challenge in the full version of the game that utilizes all of these elements. All right, so I'm just gonna keep hammering away at the defenders here.
While you do that, I'll mention that the music you're hearing, the music in the game, the battle, and everything has been done by your longtime collaborator, François-Xavier Bilodeau, who's worked with you on games at Kid Fox. He also worked on Assassin's Creed Origin, I believe. And
he's got an interesting set of experience in AAA and indie for sure. Yeah.
He's a fantastic composer. The music in this game is so epic. Sometimes it's very quiet in the more strategical moment, but when it comes to the epic moments, it's very impressive.
Absolutely, and on that front note, the animations in the game, especially for the mechs, have been done by Felicia, who's our 2D animator. She's really bringing the world to life in the tactical battles for sure. And all the effects, seeing it come together is super satisfying. And I'm excited to see more and more units come to life that way.
We might as well also mention that all of the 3D work is done by Germain, and all of the UI is done by Jani. So we're a small team, right? It's basically Studio Emoji is 8 employees, so we're not trying here to do something that's bigger than Civilization or Crusader Kings. It's a much more smaller indie studio, and we have a few also external partners that work with us, but mostly it's a very tiny team.
Absolutely.
And let's mention Owen and Quinn, our third co-founder, who are more on the tech side, programming the game and doing some of the design work with you.
Yeah, and so we're a small team trying to do big things, and this is an important step forward as we just won the Battle of Bastille, right? So we're gonna continue and proceed with the game. And so now that the Bastille has been taken, the player has the option of handling the prisoners, the garrison who are guarding the Bastille, right? What do you think we should do about that?
We should spare them. I mean, it's not their call. They were just following orders, right?
Okay, all right. Let's be forgiving and spare
these people were our brothers in arms. They're French people too.
They are. They were just doing their job. But, not everybody agrees with him. So Hébert, as mentioned, was more radical than most characters in the game. And so he pushes Governor Launay into the mob. And this is actually a historical incident where the mob does hack off the governor's head and mount it on a pike and parades it around the city.
We're talking about the French Revolution there. It was pretty damn bloody.
Certainly was. And so then, in light of that bloodshed, back at the Versailles Palace, so the king is certainly not happy that the royal guard that he sent actually turned against him to take the Bastille. But then it raises a question about loyalty of the French soldiers at the time. And so I mentioned this briefly earlier, but paradoxically, the French soldiers who are ethnically French were considered to be less loyal to the crown than foreign mercenary, precisely because they might have sympathies for the people. And so the king was, kind of in a bind, surprisingly, in this situation. But a solution emerges. And we met Lafayette and Mirabeau earlier. And they're proposing a compromise. And we'll see what that means in a second. And just a few other things here. This is also based on history, but the Bastille itself, despite rumors, did not have any weapons or prisoners. Or rather, historically, there were some, two or three, minor prisoners, but they were not really political prisoners the way that the revolutionary were expecting. And so there's some possibility that the garrison moved them out, but the reality was that the Bastille just wasn't that functional, for the crown at that point in time. And we can ask if Lucien knew that this was the reality and basically incited the riot. But no, the revolutionaries sincerely believed that something was there. But now the garrison, well, not the garrison, but Celine's troops are in the position of defending this this fortress against the rest of the royal army. But Lafayette arrives with a different proposition. And so this is a kind of a complicated part of the early days of the revolution, right? We always think the Bastille happened, the monarchy was overthrown, the king died, and then the Republic was formed, and then the Reign of Terror happened, and then it stopped. It wasn't that fast, right? The initial step, surprisingly, was an agreement that the king will become a constitutional monarch. And all the factions that existed at the time would participate in the National Convention, or historically it was called the National Assembly, the National Constitutional. And there are a lot of names for it, but the National Convention is the most popular name for it. And so this brings us to an interesting situation, right? Everyone's kind of angry. The king's not happy, the revolutionaries are not happy, but they all agree that something should be done. And peace needs to be restored, at least temporarily. And so you see a Robespierre and Danton still wanting to push things further here. But nonetheless, they're convinced by people like Mirabeau, who try to unify the country, that a peaceful way forward for now is the best policy.
Now we're getting to the strategic part of the game.
That's right. And so that's where the initial phase of the strategic gameplay comes in. But just a little bit before we get there, there's an interesting choice we need to make.
Yes.
Right? And so Lafayette invites the player to join the moderates faction, the constitutional revolutionaries who wanted to work within the constitutional monarchy framework. And in fact, a lot of the most influential people in the early revolution were part of this group. And the history nerds among you will quibble at the labels that we're putting here. Well, that they were actually Jacobin at the time, and whatnot. But just to simplify, the changing names over this chaotic period, that figures like Lafayette and Mirabeau are part of the moderates faction. Whereas people who are a bit more hardline, like Robespierre, who want to continue fighting for the people, and Danton and such, they are the Jacobins. And so they were very unhappy with the way that the assembly worked at the time. And so, in fact, they were rather more chaotic or destructive in their methods, but perhaps more effective, right? And finally, we have the royalists who we can't side with because we betrayed the king.
In the game. If you went with the royalists, you probably cannot join the Jacobins. But the moderates will accept you, whatever choice you first made, right? But are we going with the Jacobins? I mean, I like Jacques Hébert and his crazy, violent ways, no? Or you want to keep your hat and let's go with the moderates?
I'm not sure. I mean, you know what? Okay, like let's have fun with it. And we're saying that this is an alternate history game, right? So let's go with it and take off the hat, so to speak, and uh, join the Jacobin. And here we go. And you can see immediately that the visuals have changed for the player character. And we mentioned earlier that if you're feeling a bit lost in the French politics of 1789, there's a bit of the aid here. Mirabeau is able to give you more info, and there's other tutorial systems in the game right now. But we'll just talk briefly with them, and we can quiz them about any of the questions that well, I mean, we try to cover like interesting ones. So Mactan, like, is there anything that you think that we should go into now that we've started the campaign phase?
I'd like to know more about the other factions.
Okay. So then when we go to the political situation and go to the factions, we can ask about other groups. Which group should we ask about?
Let's. I want to know more about the royalists. I mean, there are enemies now.
Right.
Kind of.
So kind of. So they're kind of weird, right? So the royalists are the conservatives in this situation, and believe it or not, like they were quite powerful and influential in the early days of the revolution, right? And so among them, interestingly, is the ultra royalists led by Comte d'Artois, the king's brother. And as mentioned, like he's wants to push things even harder, like and more medieval than Louis wants himself.
Yeah. So we have 3 factions in the game, and each faction has a sub faction, right? For example, we chose to play with the Jacobins now. I want to know who are my colleagues. Yeah.
So, let's take the Cordelier, for example. So we mentioned this Jacobin. So they're the radical anarchist wing, even among the Jacobins. And so they're really crude, bloodthirsty, and such. And but we also are like colleagues with figures like Danton, who was much more hedonistic, right? And they're more pragmatic, believe it or not. And then, of course, here's the incorruptible Robespierre, who formed
yeah. It's important to know about these characters because there will be, negotiation and strategic action that involves convincing them, to vote
Absolutely.
on certain things or against certain things, right?
Absolutely. And so on that note, so like some of those features are like not available in the demo, unfortunately. But you can do things like going to the relevant club for a faction. So we were just talking about the Jacobin. Let's go to the Club des Jacobins. And we can discuss things with Hébert. And let's ask him about his thoughts on the terror, like the political violence in the country. How should it be? And so then when we ask him about it, he has an interesting view. And I think it's something that will echo with a lot of our audience these days. So like, how is it that this minority owns everything? It makes no sense. And there's an easy fix. Chop their heads, cut their balls. Wow, straight to the point. And believe it or not, the lines here are very much inspired by his style of writing, which was very crude and very, in many cases, defamatory even, right? Like,
he was a populist, right?
He was a populist.
He was a populist, and he had these journals that he was writing that were very, very important in making the people angry and want to change things.
Absolutely. And so just to bring this back to the situation on the strategic map and our campaign goals, then when we look at the objective screen, ultimately we do want our faction, the Jacobin, to control all of France, right? And we want to defeat any hostile forces. But you'll notice that the map is, like a lot of it is brown. And the reason is simply that these are rebel areas. That are being held by rioting peasants who were forming these roaming groups at this point in time, and much of the country was in disarray. And so it does create this kind of a land grab situation for the different factions. And we're here in Paris right now in red, and so our allies, the indulgence led by Danton, for example, are here in the east and so forth. And you'll see that the royalists have territories in white, and the king himself is here in Versailles, perhaps less happy about the situation. And the moderates are in blue. And so the game begins in a relatively peaceful, but also kind of like a state where that the country is not it needs to be restored to order in a sense, right? Like the factions aren't at war with each other, but I'm moving the camera too much. And we see our army here. So we see a Celine's mech, which has been reconfigured to better match the ideals of the Jacobin and the different units under our command post battle.
So different regions have different resources, right, Jongwoo? So it's important that land grab phase at the beginning is important to be able to generate funds and influence, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot. Yeah, that's exactly right. So for your strategic goals, just briefly then, if you look at the top right, we are receiving 100, funds per turn and 20 points of power per turn. And that's being generated as a result of our control of Paris and the different buildings and such in Paris. And so you can see that the city hall, for example, generates 10 influence and the market generates coins. You'll also notice that there's owners of these regions, and we're able to upgrade it to generate more resources. Or if we pass the right laws, which is going to be available in the full version of the game, we're able to actually even seize it from a particular social class and give it to another social class. Because we're also simulating the different populations of like the proletariat, the bourgeoisie, and the nobility, and so forth in the game, and their political approval of the player's actions.
Brings us to the propaganda approach, right?
Yeah, so let's give that a shot. So right now, when we look at Paris, so the proletariat are very happy with this here. Like, is that true for other regions? I guess they generally are. So we'll try to appeal to the bourgeoisie who are able to vote in this point in time. The proletariat don't get to. We have to change the laws in order to make that happen. So we will use propaganda here in Paris. We'll target the masses and we'll promote the Jacobin. Actually, no, we'll target the bourgeoisie. Sorry, I misspoke. And that'll boost our popularity with them somewhat. And we'll condemn the royalists, classic, and we'll confirm the action. And these strategic actions are depicted in a narrative-driven manner to like help mesh everything together as a singular narrative experience. Oh, we're on something there, and we condemn the injustices, and people are in support. And so that raises our support with the different factions. I think might be a few like bugs here that will iron out in the future. But the idea being that earning the political support of the different social classes helps us to achieve our eventual goals of unifying the country under the Jacobin umbrella. We can also recruit units or actually other officers, but just like looking at some of the units that are available. So we've seen the line infantry, but we can recruit our own cannons. We can't afford it yet. Maybe we'll attempt it on a later turn. Or we could try to recruit colossi. Oh no, that's not available in the demo. But in the full version of the game, you can make a custom colossi, or rather like other models of the colossi.
You would not have enough phlogiston yet anyway to do that
true.
At this point.
At this point in time, it's a bit early in the game, and so we mentioned phlogiston at the start of our demonstration. But so this is the material that allows for these heat-powered mechs to function in the first place. And so you can think of it as like a hyper fuel if you want, and it's available in a few regions in France, and Paris is one of the few that is able to generate it, which is why we had some gain there. We'll speed things up, and you can see the AI factions taking their turns now. Oop, here we go. Right on. And so then at the start of the second turn, we see an event that pops up where Mirabeau asks the player if they want to visit the king with them. We'll do this to see what happens. But essentially, the king wanted Mirabeau's advice on what to do about reforms that he receives that he does not want to approve. Theoretically, he has the veto to the power to reject any reform, but doing so would be decidedly unpopular decision, right? And so the king is very frustrated with what's happening. Curse the Constitution. He's the king, but it is a compromise. That's the whole point of the constitutional monarchy. But the king is growingly frustrated. And in the full version of the game, this event wasn't supposed to happen so early in the campaign, but for the purposes of demo and giving you guys a taste of how the game feels, we decided to include it rather early.
Yeah, well, there are going to be a lot of events in the full campaign. We try to put many of them very quickly in the demo to give an idea of the game in a short time.
Right. And so it's getting clear that something might break soon in the monarchy. So we'll, in the interest of time, I'll skip this turn as well. But we'll see soon that the situation is not stable. It's a mere inconvenience at best. Sorry, go ahead.
There's actually a terror and a stability mechanic that's at the top of the screen with the election coming in 4 turns, right?
Yeah. So stability and terror kind of work in opposite, often work in opposite directions, but sometimes they converge. Terror is a measure of the political violence that is happening, right? So how much extra legal or ethically questionable or outright unethical things are you willing to do to get the change that you want for the country? And as a result of each faction taking their doing unethical action, the terror bar increases, and there will be consequences in the campaign. But on the flip side, stability is a measure of well governance or order in the country. And so sometimes you need to take terror actions in order to better establish order. But here we have an event where Marquis de Lafayette is summoned the players to Paris to discuss the fact that the king has disappeared. This is also a historical incident. So the king escapes from the palace in the middle of the night, and no one has any idea where he is. Right now, the player is asked to try searching in the northeast. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move forward and try just attack, moving to the northeast. Here we had a quick look at just an auto resolve of a battle for those of you guys who want to stay on the strategic layer longer. Also execute, imprison, release mechanics, which will be more fleshed out in the full version of the game. For the present, we'll imprison and raise the terror a little bit because that's the only law that's passed right now. But yeah, so the king has disappeared. He's probably heading towards the northeastern border. We'll see what happens in the next turn where he shows up.
So yes, the king wanted to flee to Austria in what happened in real life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because Marie Antoinette, his wife, was the sister of the Emperor of Austria.
Yeah, so definitely the king was growingly frustrated with how the constitutional monarchy was turning out, as were the revolutionaries. So he eventually decided that the best thing to do is to get out of the country and come back with the Austrian forces to take his power back. But unfortunately for him, in a small town that he's passing through, he is discovered by a clerk because he paid for his horses with a coin that of course has his face on it. So he is discovered. But whereas in history he was arrested immediately, we changed things to be a bit more dramatic. He links up with royalist forces nearby that he was historically was supposed to meet up with, but failed to. And he deploys his army and decides to fight his way to the border. And so we can see that the king's army is here now. We'll move to this region here in order to intercept the king's arrival next turn. So moving things along here. Let's go.
Isn't history entertaining?
There's a lot of things that happen that's completely unbelievable, or like the sequence of accidents, or like conflicting intentions that leads to like situations like this, right? Okay, we're almost and the king has arrived in Rhymes, so we will attack his army and capture him in battle, or try to. Cool. And now we have a look at one of the nighttime battles in the game. And so we see Celine's mech here at our troops position. And we'll just begin mission here. And so Celine tries to convince the king to return, frustrated as she is, but the king refuses because he feels like he's a puppet. And this is reflective of how the revolutionaries and the king's attitudes were at the time. And he chose to dramatize it in a way that the history textbook would not. And that brings us to the end of the demo. We don't get to fight the king.
That's such a cliffhanger!
Well, thanks for sticking through our demonstration. And so this demo is, we're super excited for you guys to be able to play it. And if you're interested in anything you saw today, please add us to your wish list and join our Discord and see what's coming next. Because we're super excited to deliver like all the things we have planned for early access in early 2025.
Yeah, from our Steam page, you have the links to all of our social media. Obviously, if you want to know more about the Bonaparte development, when we're coming out. Also, we appreciate all feedback, either from the demo itself through our Discord, but also once the early access starts, the game is not finished, we will have a lot of feedback from players that are playing the early access version, and we want to be able to adjust development to make sure that the game is as fun as possible for everyone. So thank you for watching. We appreciate your taking the time to listen to us ramble about French history for 45 minutes, but well, thank you, and hopefully you play the game.
All right, thanks everybody. See you later. Bye.